Hello and welcome to this episode of MediaUp Conversations, an interdisciplinary platform where communication, media, and related professionals and scholars share insights on topical concepts, strategies, and tools. MediaUp Conversation is powered by Jacksonville Professional Development Service, in line with its mission to facilitate knowledge sharing between town and gang. My name is Ifeanyichukwu Dinwoke. I'm your host. On this episode of MediaUp Conversation, we are focusing on how to secure fellowship as a journalist, and my guest is a Nigerian independent journalist with byline in international media organization, Mr. Patrick Egwu. Mr. Patrick, thank you for joining me on this episode of MediaUp Conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Egwu is a freelance journalist and have reported from Toronto, Johannesburg, Berlin, and Lagos for the Globe and Mail, Foreign Policy, NPR, Rest of World, Daily Maverick, World Politics Review, American Magazine, and elsewhere. He is most recently 2021-2022 Gordon N. Fisher Journalist for Human Rights Journalism Fellow at Massey College, University of Toronto. Mr. Patrick, once again, thank you very much for joining me on this edition. I would like us to start from the beginning. Why did you choose journalism instead of law?
Thank you for having me once again. And starting up, I had wanted to study law in the university, right? I had wanted to, be a lawyer, study law, and the motivation for that was at that point for me to use the legal profession or my profession as a lawyer to, speak up for people, marginalized communities who, are facing oppression from maybe governments, from private individuals with vested interests, or other structures of the society. Just basically, that was the motivation at that point. And so I wrote JAM, which is mandatory to gain admission, into the university. Wrote JAM, got my scores, and then wrote the screening exam for the University of Nigeria because that was the university I selected. At that point, you were expected to select 3 universities, the first, second, and third choice. So I selected the University of Nigeria. The first university in Nigeria, the reputation and all that. I selected the University of Nigeria and wrote JAM, got my scores, and went for the screening exam on that day. After the screening exam, I couldn't get the cutoff mark, for the law faculty at the university. So I had to do what we call apply for the shopping list, the provisional list, or sort of, more like stepping down from what you wanted to study. And the closest course available at that point for me was mass communication. So that was how I ended up applying to study mass communication instead of law, and, got admitted, started studying, mass communication at the Jackson School of Journalism, University of Nigeria in Nsukka. And that was how it all started. And, my first year, second year, I fell in love with journalism. I fell in love with writing. I fell in love with, everything about, radio, print, media generally. And that was when I found out that I mustn't be a lawyer to speak up for people. I mustn't be a lawyer to advocate for people, to speak up, to amplify the voices of marginalized communities, that I could as well do that as a journalist, with my pen, I could, write and advocate for them, speak up for them, through my stories, highlighting the issues that they face and other stuff like that. So that was how it all started. And I just was happy with the way it turned out, that I didn't end up studying law because, I have no regrets that I didn't study law. I'm very happy that I ended up studying mass communication. I'm very happy that I ended up being a journalist. And that was, that's my story, how from, aspiring to study law, I ended up studying mass communication and now being a journalist.
For many people, one of their considerations for studying law is the economic factor. There is this idea that lawyers generally are better paid than journalists. In fact, for many Nigerian journalists, they complain about poor remuneration, which is why many people graduate and they go into PR ad or go to work in corporate communication and they not practice journalism. Did you not think about the economic consideration? Did you not think, if I don't take mass comm, I'll be shortchanged financially?
I mean, at that point, the economic consideration wasn't, part of my thinking at that point. I think I was purely moved by passion, purely moved by, what I could do with my profession. I mean, which is mostly, advocating for people, writing, being the voice for marginalized communities, right? That was, the motivation at that point. I didn't think about the economic considerations, maybe how much I would earn, how much I would make being a journalist and being a lawyer. So that was it for me at that point. But I mean, come to think of it, yes, journalists are poorly paid in Nigeria. The welfare is very poor. I know journalists who are, owed salaries for months, even up to a year. Some media companies in Nigeria, I think a few of them have such bad reputation, and I mean they are poorly paid, but there are also journalists in Nigeria who earn well, earn decent salaries and live well, I mean they may not be as rich as those working in the oil companies or working with the big financial firms or accounting firms, Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, and the rest of them, but they are living well. And like I said, there are those who are poorly paid, those who earn meager, amounts at the end of the month, but even lawyers, I think, are not exceptions in this regard. Lawyers in Nigeria also earn, poorly, unless you are practicing a different kind of law or you are the legal advisor to a politician, a corrupt politician, and you are getting some, paychecks at the end of the month, or, you are getting huge sums of money for defending the illegal practices of the politicians, or maybe you are working for the large law firms, or you are, part of the legal department in an oil company, or working for corporations or practicing a different kind of law, corporate law, or you are into real estate as a lawyer and stuff like that. But apart from that, I have friends who are lawyers and I know how much they earn. I mean, they earn poorly compared to journalists. They earn very poorly and they are complaining bitterly and, wanting to switch careers.
All right. Take us through your journey from your first byline to writing for international organizations. What was it the first time you saw your name on a newspaper? How did you move from that to writing for international organizations?
I think my first byline, I started off pretty much, from my first day in the university, writing and submitting to blogs, mostly blogs and local publications and stuff like that. And I think my first byline, I was very happy when it came out in one of the local publications. I've forgotten the name of the local publications. I can't even remember. That was many years ago. But I think my first byline for a national publication was for Sun newspaper, when I contributed an article, on a debate about the UK government asking Nigerian travelers to traveling to the UK, or who wants to travel to the UK, to deposit, I think, £3,000 at that time. So there was, lots of debates, lots of people arguing against it, lots of people writing, opinion pieces, to condemn the rule by the UK government. So I did a piece at that point, submitted to the editor, and it was published. And I remember that was in my second year, during my internship at Radio Nigeria. It came out in the papers. I went to buy the papers at that time and, brought it back to the newsroom. Everybody was happy for me. I was very happy. It was, Sun newspaper, one of the biggest in Nigeria, National Daily and stuff like that. It was big for me, and I shared with, friends, classmates, and stuff like that. That was my first byline a national publication that I can remember. Then my first byline for an international publication was for, that was in 2016 for a publication called African Argument. I mean, writing mostly about, issues in Africa, current affairs, politics, culture, and the rest of them. And it was published, I wrote the article in 2016, it was published in 2017. African Arguments is sponsored by the UK government, by the Royal African Society. So, so that was my first, and it's a digital publication. It's not print, but it's international. It's not national like Sun newspaper. So that was my first foreign byline, and I was, very happy when I saw my name, and you could send a link of your article to anybody, to your friends to read, and they could click. The joy that comes with it, and all that. So yeah, I was very happy with both my first byline back in my first year, my second byline, writing for a national publication like Sun newspaper, and my first international byline for a foreign publication, African Argument.
So what it means is that you actually started very early writing and publishing your content in media. Now, you of course, you even started writing for National Day before you graduated. If all of that happened, why did you continue going to school? Why did you continue? Based on my finding, you have 2 master's degree already, and then you did a fellowship in Canada, I think between last year and this year. So what was the drive about continuous going to school when you already have, I don't want to say reach the peak, but you have gotten most of the byline that most people aspire to have?
We can't stop learning, right? We can't stop learning, and learning in a classroom environment. You can't say that you've got your byline, your first byline or second byline, you write for foreign publications, and still, you can't continue studying. Learning mustn't be in a classroom, in a classroom environment. So you could learn from having a conversation with your friends or with colleagues, or from reading up articles, right? From following debate, from listening to radio, and, watching TV and stuff. We learn in different ways, but I think it's still kind of different learning from somebody who is more experienced than you, somebody who has seen it all, not really seen it all, but somebody who has that experience, both publishing experience, both research experience, both, journalism experience as a whole, who has experience on a particular or a specialized aspect of mass communication. It could be print, it could be advertising, it could be online, it could be multimedia. And that's why, it's very important to learn under, such experts with that kind of specialization. And that, where do you get that? You get that, apart from reading online, apart from self-taught, resources that you can find on, attending webinars and stuff like that, YouTube. But it's important to have a kind of one-on-one, face-to-face interaction, with somebody who has, who has the hands-on experience, who has practiced, who you can be able to ask questions, direct questions, you can be able to work together with on a project, and, learn in the process. And that's the whole concept about, going to school, studying for a degree or a higher degree, a master's program or a bachelor's and stuff like that. But the general truth about it is that we learn every day. There's no way we can stop learning, and that's why people go back to school to have an MBA, PhD. They keep on climbing and gaining more knowledge. But for journalism, to be honest with you, you don't even need a master's degree, right? With a bachelor's, I have colleagues, foreign colleagues who only did their bachelor's in journalism, and they're good, they're practicing, they're winning awards, they're winning fellowship grants and stuff like that, right? But if you want to advance more, if you are looking in the direction of being an academic, for example, being climbing through the ladder and becoming a researcher, consulting for firms, and actually doing an independent research on a particular field, mass communication field, researching and producing some papers and stuff like that, you may want to go back to school, for example, and that's why people go take up PhD project, PhD program, in order to actually study a specialized field in mass communication. It could be the ethics of communication. It could be corporate communication. It could be just any field that you are interested, or investigative journalism. There is a PhD program on purely investigative journalism. There is a PhD program on human rights, depending on the area you are interested and most passionate about. And I mean, that's basically the motivation. And also for me, that's the motivation of, and for me also, I like my first master's degree at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka was, mass communication and all that. But the second master's that I had at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa was a fellowship that I won. Right, I won a fellowship, which was for 5 African journalists, across Africa, and I was selected. And the fellowship comes with a master's program, and that was how I ended up. There's no way you can separate the master's and leave the master's alone to do the fellowship. The fellowship comes with the master's. It was structured in a way that you'll be studying, and you need to study for a program. You need to study a media program that comes together with the fellowship, and producing some media projects at the end of it. And that was how I went and completed my second master's. You wouldn't expect me at that point to say, okay, I have a master's degree, you know what, I'm not going for this fellowship because it comes with a master's program. So I mean, that was how I ended up studying for my second master's degree. And going ahead to attend fellowships are just different kind of structured journalism program that some of them you don't end degrees at the end of it. You audit classes, right? You attend classes, you do the readings, but you don't get degrees at the end of it. I mean, the whole aim is for you to kind of learn in a newsroom, in a classroom environment, meet colleagues, interact with your lecturers, interact with colleagues, undertake readings on a particular subject, and exchange ideas with your peers, organize workshops or seminars on a particular topic. It could be on, the rise of populism in Europe, for example, or the rise of the Black Lives Matter, for example. You could take up courses in that regard and discuss with your colleagues, organize a small group session to interrogate, matters, how it all started, the impact, reaction from politicians, and the general impact on society and the rest of that, how to advocate more for Black people, diversity and inclusion and a whole lot of issues like that.
For a lot of people, they are struggling to get one fellowship. We have 2 already. So how were you able to, should I say, pack these fellowships to yourself?
It doesn't come easy, and I don't only have 2 fellowships. I have more than 2 fellowships, right? Different types of fellowships and all that, but they don't come easy. You need to put yourself out there. You need to, you need to know your area of specialization, like where you have the skills and experience, and you target fellowships in that regard, right? And there are different fellowships on climate change, on investigative journalism, on human rights, on gender equality, on inclusion, on diversity. Different on. If you're a business journalist, for example, there are fellowships for business journalists who cover business, the economy and stuff like that. There are different types of fellowships in journalism generally. So you need to know where you belong to and target those fellowships. And how do you do that? You search for these opportunities. There are websites where you can get these fellowships. They share fellowship opportunities, right? Upcoming fellowships. You keep the date in mind, gather your application, submit your application, and hope for the best. Applying for a fellowship doesn't mean that you're going to get it at the end of the day. I mean, the fellowship that I got in South Africa, I applied for three times. I actually got it on my third try, right? So you need to keep on, putting out your applications, submitting. If you get rejected, you apply again. You polish your application. You find that, you review. You could reach out to those who have gotten the fellowship and ask questions, or maybe ask them to help you review your application and where to improve, so that your application will stand out strong and be considered for the particular fellowship. And that's basically, there's no secret. There's no magic wand to apply in, for fellowships, whether local or international fellowships, whether reporting fellowships, whether applying for a grant, it's just to submit an application and hope for the best, because if you don't apply, you don't get in. That's the first rule. You need to first submit the application, gather your material. If it requires you getting your transcripts, most of them don't even require transcripts. They only require you to submit your work samples. As a journalist, you have clips, you have online links to your stories that you've done. So you can submit them. If they require, if they ask you to submit links to, but most of them normally ask you to submit links to stories you've done. It could be a radio broadcast. It could be radio audio or whatever, it could be a TV clip. It could be anything, just to show what you have done and what you are capable of doing. They normally need that in judging, applications. And depending on how strong your story samples are, that will determine a lot whether you get selected for a particular fellowship or not. Even whether it is a grant, whether it is just a fellowship to study in a university, and whether for a year, for 6 months, no matter the duration, they normally require you to submit story samples, what we have done. Everybody wants to see you can't just come up and say, I will excel, I can do this. They need to know, what you have done and what you are capable of doing if given that opportunity.
Okay, now you have obviously maybe studied or read about at least a dozen fellowship requirements, and maybe applied or maybe up to a dozen times. Now, from all the experience you gathered from both applying, studying, grant, and all a fellowship application and all that, can you just provide a guide for someone who wants to start applying? Perhaps mistake I shouldn't make this. I should write my profile. General guide. What kind of story? What do I do? What kind of media should I publish my content to stand a bigger chance? We just want to know how do we put our best foot forward for someone who wants to apply for fellowship?
I won't be speaking like an expert, but I would just say that you need to know what type of fellowship you're applying for. You can't just apply for every fellowship, right? You can't just apply for everything. Because as a journalist, we have journalists who cover general beats, who write about politics, they write about business, they write about human rights, they write about climate change, they write about gender, they write about health, different migration and stuff like that. And there are those who are specialists, they have a particular beat or beats, maybe two beats that they cover. Maybe they cover health inequality, for example, or they cover migration and refugee crisis, for example. Or there are those who cover, maybe three beats and development, politics, and gender, or politics and society and development and stuff like that. And there are those who cover, for example, climate change. So you need to know where you fall in. You need to know where you have expertise, right? So I think the tips I will be giving is to first determine to know where you fall in, and that will help you to streamline the type of fellowship you go after. And the second one is each fellowship has its own list of requirements. You need to read that and know what they want you to to submit or what they are looking out for in prospective applicants. Some may say we want those who have between 3 to 5 years experience. So you need to know whether you fall into this bracket. If you don't fall, if you have less than 3 years experience and you apply, well, some of them may say if you have good work experience, if you've produced some impactful journalism, even if you have 2 years experience, some of them may have that exception that they may be able to accept to. Then some are very strict with their requirements. If you don't have 5 years experience, they won't accept it. They won't even, that's one way to not to even consider your application or go through it once they say that you have 4 years or 3 years and they want 5 years. So you need to look at the requirements of each application. Some of them want some of them may say submit your stories you've produced, right? Maybe online, or maybe if you work for radio, if you work for TV, some stories you've done in the past regarding to that particular focus of the fellowship. If the fellowship is on migration, they want you to submit stories that you've done on migration so that they can consider it. Like I said, some are lenient. If you've done a story that is not related to migration but is different, some may say, okay, this person has done this story very well, then he has the ability to do something on migration if given the opportunity. They may consider, and like I said, some are very strict. They may say, if they say they want something on migration, they really want that on migration. So if you submit anything, you won't be considered at all. Then another component for consideration in fellowship is statement of purpose, right? Virtually all fellowships normally ask applicants to submit maybe 500 word or 1,000 words statement of purpose. Statement of purpose, basically, what do you why are you applying for that fellowship? What do you have in mind to achieve during the duration of the fellowship, right? So that's where you make your arguments. That's where you state about why you want to apply the fellowship, the motivation. Maybe it could be because you've never had any fellowship in your life and you think this fellowship is going to help in your career development, in your professional development, by interacting with colleagues, networking with colleagues. That it will be an opportunity for you to meet people from diverse fields, from different countries, and spending time with them, for example, for a month or spending a year with them will actually enrich your journalism experience. It could be your motivation, and it is valid, very valid. The judges may consider you because of that, because you've never had such an opportunity before, and you are looking forward to having an opportunity like that before. And they may say, okay, let's give this guy a shot. He has the prospect. He's, passionate about it. He's motivated, and they may give you the opportunity to, they may consider you and select you for that fellowship. So your statement of purpose it is called different names. It could be statement of purpose or letter of motivation, or letter of interest, or letter of letter of explanation. That's where you get to tell the judges more about yourself and your driving force for that particular fellowship. I think this is the most important component in all the requirements for fellowships. And like I said, all fellowships normally ask for letter of purpose from applicants, where you get to state your motivation, why you want to apply for the fellowship and stuff like that. And I would advise, after writing it yourself, you should try to give it to, a senior colleague to take a look at it, edit and maybe make suggestions, because you may think that you've done a wonderful work. You've written well, that you are going, by what you've written, that you're going to definitely convince the judges. But it is very important to give it to, your superiors. It could be your editor. It could be another journalist who has won fellowships, who has traveled a lot, and he knows what judges are looking for. You could give it to him to make some inputs, to make some comments, and ask him some questions and how you can justify that. Then that's another thing. Like another one again is to get ready for the interview. Interviews are mostly when you get shortlisted for the fellowship. Then they may ask you to have an interview with them, and that's when they get to interrogate everything you've submitted, from your work experience, from your letter of purpose, and other aspects of the fellowship. What again? Am I missing anything? I've talked about knowing what fellowship to apply for, reading the requirements for the fellowship. Like I said, all fellowships, they have different requirements, so you need to stick to the requirements. Then again, your letter of purpose, which I just said now that you should make it to be striking enough for any judge who wants to read it, because that depends whether you're going to be selected or invited for an interview. Some don't require interviews. Not all of them. Some may just select you straight away without an interview, but most of them would ask for an interview to get to learn more about your inspiration, your motivation, your work experience, your general journalism experience, and what you've done, what you are capable of doing. What again am I missing? I think these are the three most important aspects for, you asked for kind of an advice or tips for those who want to apply for fellowship. Then what again? Most fellowships, there are other requirements, but these three requirements, I think that they are the most important. One, to know the type of fellowship, if you even meet the requirements. Then two is to read their eligibility requirements, because they may decide to, if you don't meet the eligibility requirements and apply, then your application may not be considered. Then the most important for any scholarship, for any fellowship opportunity you want to apply, is to write a very striking statement of purpose. Some of them call it statements of purpose, some call it letter of interest, some call it motivation letter, some call it letter of explanation. That's where they get to learn you and learn more about you. And some will say write between 500 to 1,000 words. Some are very strict about it. If they say write nothing less than 500, don't go below 500, aim for 500 or 550 or 600. Some are not even strict about it. If they say 500, you write 300, they will consider you if you write a very striking statement of purpose. And I would advise, just find somebody to give your statement of purpose to take a look at, especially if you haven't gotten any fellowship before. That's your first try. You could meet somebody who has applied for it and was successful, to take a look, take a stab at your application, your general package, your general application. It mustn't only be the statement of purpose. Everything you want to apply, take them, give it to them to review and make a comment or make few comments or tell you what you need to do to upgrade it, to make it look better, to make it look, to find a hook and that would make it interesting for judges or those in the selection committee who are going to consider your application. Because for any fellowship application, there's a committee, right? It could be 3-man committee, 5-man committee or whatever, who are going to review your application, sit around the table, review your application, and people from different countries are applying for that fellowship, right? So they may consider your own with another candidate in Ghana or Uganda or Kenya, and if theirs is more powerful than yours, then definitely they're going to select them. There's no argument about that. So try to make your application package, look powerful and striking enough so that you will stand a high chance of making it to the interview stages. Then if you make it to the interview stages, you have like 70-80% chance of being selected for the fellowship.
Thank you very much. If you just joined us, you're still listening to MediaUp Conversations, powered by the Jackson Professional Development Series. We'll be discussing securing fellowship opportunities for journalists, and my guest has been Patrick Egwu, who is a freelance journalist and has secured many fellowships. When we come back after this break, we'll get to other aspects of our discussion. One of the things I want to be finding out from him when we come back is, does it matter if I don't have an academic background in mass communication or related field? Does age matter in application? How do I even write story? If I don't have a story, I can't apply. So how do I write the kind of story that stands out? So stay with us. Once we come back after this, we'll get into all of that.
As graduates of the University of Nigeria Nsukka Mass Communication Department, we call ourselves Jacksonites. Years after graduation, we have not lost touch with our roots. We give back. We lend our shoulders for current students to stand on and get ahead. We donate resources and facilitate seminar sessions. Our flagship initiative, the Jacksonite Professional Development Series, JPDS, has become robust and sustainable through the efforts of Chinedumba, the steering committee chair, and her formidable working groups. Since July 2021, when our first quarterly seminar debuted to date, we have continued to grow our channels for enriching our target audience with the launch of 3 brands, namely Knowledge Hub, MediaUp Conversations, and JPDS Podcasts. So far, we have had 9 seminars with 15 facilitators and over 1,000 participants. The good news is that if you missed any of them, you can access them and other resources such as MediaUp Conversations, podcasts, and blogs with a click of a button. To access all our resources, visit jacksonitespds.com to get notifications on our latest blogs, podcasts, events, and resources. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at JacksonitesPDS. Share your feedback by emailing hello@jacksonitespds.com.
Welcome back. You're still listening to MediaUp Conversations powered by Jacksonite Professional Development Series. And on this episode, we are discussing securing fellowship for journalists. My guest has been Patrick Egwu. Patrick, please, I want to understand. Assuming I want to apply for fellowship and I don't have a background in mass comm like you do, perhaps my first degree is in veterinary medicine. Does it matter? Especially if I have publications, whether print, audio, or video, print or electronic.
I don't think it matters. The most important thing is to have the passion. You have to have the motivation, to have some strong work experience or work samples that you can submit. Alongside your application to be considered. There's an ongoing argument, and it has been going on for a long time, that those who had, their first degrees in different fields other than mass communication they turn out to become better journalists than those who study mass communication. Whether that is true or not, I don't know, and it's not what I'm gonna say, but my opinion is, my view on this is, studying a different, having your first degree in, let's say you have your first degree studying political science, or first degree studying environmental science, for example, and after that even while you were studying that, you had the passion for journalism, for writing. You've been writing while studying that, and at the end of the day, you decided to go back to a journalism school, or not even mass communication school, maybe a journalism school, to do a 1-year diploma program to learn the basics of writing, of journalism, the ethics of journalism. There's an argument that you will turn out to be a good environmental reporter, right? Writing about climate change, for example, because you have that experience, you have that background experience, you have the your first degree in environmental science, so you know more about environment than a journalist who just studied mass communication and combined everything. The journalist may be better than you in writing. There's no even argument that the journalist will be better than you in writing, because if you attend a journalism school to do your diploma for 1 year, you will learn writing, storytelling skills, interview skills and stuff like that. So both of you will be competing, but there's no competition, and I think I'm more like deviating from the question. But the fact is, there's nothing stopping you from applying, whether you have your first degree in another field that is not mass communication. the most important thing is to have the work experience, is to, is to have work samples, to put up a good statement of purpose or motivation letter for the particular application you're applying for, and definitely you'll stand a chance to get it. I know many people who didn't study journalism for their first degree, and I mean they've gotten fellowships, they've gone ahead to do their master's degree in journalism, outside of the country, and they never studied mass communication, and they are doing, very well in their field that they cover as journalists. So there's nothing stopping you. There's no obstacle in that. It's not even a challenge, as a matter of fact. Once you have the experience, you express your motivation and how the fellowship is going to help your career and professional development. You stand a very high chance of being considered for the fellowship.
All right, now, from all the things you said, one thing that is very clear is that if you don't have a story, you can't apply. Because the story or your work is what proves that you actually moved.
Yeah, I'm not that you can apply. You can apply, but you may not be selected. To stand a chance of being selected, you need to have a story. You must have done something. You must have written. You must have produced something as a radio on-air presenter or radio journalist or TV reporter or what. You must have done something. If you haven't and you want to apply for a fellowship, you can do that. Nobody's going to stop you from beginning the application process to the final stages and submitting it. But good luck at the end of it.
All right. Now, what it means is to stand a chance of even being considered, then you have to have a story.
Yeah, because all fellowships that I've applied, all of them would ask you to submit your work samples. All of them. I haven't seen anyone that will say, we can skip that part. Just submit and tell us, submit a strong motivation letter that we may consider. We don't even need your words. All of them. And if you have anyone, or if you think there's any fellowship existing today, as of today, that doesn't require work sample, just send it my way. I think I will be interested in applying for that.
Where I'm actually going with my question is, how do I get a strong story? Story strong enough to get attention, like the story was about Catholic Church burial and stuff like that. How do I come up with a strong story that gets published in international platforms?
So when I say stories to apply for fellowships with, you mustn't write a Pulitzer-winning story, right? I mean, Pulitzer, as of today, is the highest prize in journalism. You mustn't write a Pulitzer-winning story or whatever winning story, or an Emmy-nominated story, for example. But just doing normal story, normal community story. A story as simple as doing something on erosion or flooding in a local community and how people are battling, how people are showing resilience despite the impact and the everything they've lost in as a result of erosion or flooding. You could write about farmers and how they've lost their livelihoods, how their farmlands have been destroyed by flood. You could write about a traditional birth attendant who is using, sterilized equipment to help pregnant mothers, during their delivery process and stuff like that. As a rural community, because of the absence of government hospital or clinic or whatever, you could write about the decay or the poor state of healthcare in a rural community and how the government hasn't shown any interest in upgrading or equipping it and stuff like that. I mean, there are many stories to write, but there are many story ideas. The ideas could come from you researching and, taking notes of daily occurrence in where you live and, reading local newspapers. From there, you could get story ideas and discussing with your editor. Your editor could assign you a story to do. Then from there, you do the story, go for the field work, interview people, interview your sources, and come back to write the story and work with your editor to get the story published. And while writing for international outlets is very important, while writing for national publication like Sun newspaper, like Vanguard, like Daily Trust, like the Cable or Premium Times, all these, popular online and print publications are very important. But you could write for a local publication if the story is a local publication with an online presence, and if the story is very impactful, you could see the change and how viral that story would go, right? There are local journalists, community, town, working for community papers, local small papers, and they're producing very impactful stories that, make a local story with international relevance or with international or national impact. Okay, it could be about corruption, about a massacre that happened in a local community, and you are writing for a local community paper, and it will have national relevance that will even draw the attention of the government or the ministers or lawmakers, to intervene in that matter. The most important thing is to do a good story. To do a good story, it's one thing to have a good story to do, and this is another thing to write it well, because you need that storytelling skills to produce. To be a good storyteller, to tell the story well, that your readers will be hooked and will be interested in reading what you've produced. And it's that depends on the editor you work with. That depends. Your editor can help you polish and sharpen your story and make it come out well at the end of the day when it's published. So, that's how to do it. Your question about how to even do the stories that will be considered. So, these fellowship opportunities are not looking for stories that have won awards, right? If they have won awards, or if the story has won an award, fine, the better. But whether it has won or it hasn't won any award, you've done a story that is, that was well researched, you interviewed and sourced your materials well, and you wrote it well, and it came out well, and it's whether it doesn't generate any impact, but at least it's attracted the attention of the councillor or the local government chairman of that community to react and promise that something will be done about it. It's enough, and I think that's all you need in your story. But the most important thing depends, the responsibility falls on the reporter, to pitch a good story, research the story well, interview relevant people. Preferably a human interest story that will elicit interest from the reading public, from lawmakers, from stakeholders and stuff like that. I think that's all you need, and that's the kind of story you need, and you'll be good to go.
I'm taking you back to where we started from. When someone listens to your story from as early as first year, you started writing stories that get published, even though it's in a local newspaper, one get the impression that you never got a rejection from an editor, or it was, like we say in local parlance, so there was no obstruction on your way. Is that a correct assumption?
No, that's not. That's incorrect, because I get rejections, all the time as a journalist. Not only me, my colleagues, we get fellowships, we get all this recognition, we get grants, we win grants, scholarships, fellowships, and stuff like that. And somebody reading from their room or from their living room may think that it was all an easy process, but they weren't. I personally have, even this month, I've received rejections from journalism applications that I applied, some months back. And I think the most important thing is how you handle those rejections, and because even the most successful journalists get rejected at some point in their career, maybe for a grant, for a fellowship, or for whatever, or as a freelance journalist, pitching a story to a publication, and I mean, you get rejected. They may tell you that you have a wonderful pitch, but we don't have the budget to pursue this story at this point, or we have somebody who is already working on this story that your pitch came late, or different, or this is not the right time for us to do a story like this. So I get rejections all the time, not once in a year or once in a month. Like, I get rejections from different journalism applications that I've submitted. So it's a wrong assumption to say that it was all easy and I've never had a rejection, or I and my colleagues out there who have excelled or who continue to excel in the profession haven't had any, rejections at all. I mean, that's completely false. We have rejections. We handle them differently. Maybe that's the only difference with our own rejection, and so for me, when I get a rejection, I just don't take it as anything. Of course, I feel bad that, I feel bad for the rejection and would have wanted it to come, to come successful, for example. But if it doesn't come, I move on very quickly from it. I don't dwell on it. I don't dwell on the rejection or cry over it or something like that. And another good way is to apply, submit different applications, journalism applications, or maybe grants or fellowship, so that if this one comes rejected, the next one may, come successful, right? But if you put all your hopes in one particular journalism fellowship, and if it comes out with a rejection, that's what breaks you down. But if you have different options, different ongoing projects, you won't even feel anything bad about it. You could decide to apply next year with a stronger application, with a stronger statement of purpose, with a different approach, different proposal, and definitely you'll be considered.
I want us to conclude with you talking to somebody directly. There's a first year student who just started mass communication, and then advise him, maybe from your experience, mistakes, successes. Talk to that first year student directly. What do you think you'll tell the person in 1 minute? The most important advice you give the person in 1 minute about excelling, not just in school, but also outside.
I mean, so I would say start as early as you can. I mean, don't wait to start in your final year or third year. You start immediately, first year. I know it's very overwhelming, with the registration. We're running around from one department or office to the other. You have a lot going on for you at that point. But you could start at that point to start developing the passion, showing interest, the motivation to, in journalism, reading what others have written, attending events, trying to, cover it from no matter how you can, maybe for a local publication, and having mentors, those you look up to in the profession, those you can ask questions, those you can reach out to for advice and guide and, or tips on what to do. So it's very important to have a mentor. I think that's the most important advice that I would give to, a first-year journalist. Have a mentor, show interest. It doesn't stop at having a mentor. If you have a mentor without showing interest or the passion for the profession, then I think it comes to nothing. You must have the passion first. It is from that passion that you look up to people that can guide you as you scale up, as you move up your academy, second year, third year, final year. And that mentor will guide you, provide you with tips, and I mean, you can even start traveling, attending foreign conferences, not local conferences in Nigeria. I'm talking about foreign, from your undergraduate days. You can start attending foreign conferences, workshops, seminars outside of the country, to a different country. It broadens your experience, it broadens your network, it broadens your contacts, By the time you get to your final year or you graduate, you will be highly sought after by publications that you started writing for back in your first year, and other media organizations wanting to hire you to work for them. But start early, have a mentor, show the passion, and you'll be good.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Patrick, for being my guest on this edition of MediaUp Conversation. This is what we'll call it a wrap of MediaUp Conversation for this week. My guest has been Mr. Patrick Egwu. Thank you again for sharing your thoughts with us. Until we bring you another exciting conversation, please catch up with other episodes and more resources we share from across our social media handle and YouTube at Jacksonite PDS. To learn more about us, please visit our website www.jacksonitepds.com. My name is Ifeanyichukwu Dinwoke. Please go grab your opportunity for fellowship. Thank you very much.